She should not have been in his library. She knew that, felt the impropriety of it settle over her like a cold fog the moment her slippered foot crossed the threshold. Yet it was the letter that stopped her breath entirely. Not one letter, not two, but 43 of them, bound in a faded black ribbon, hidden beneath the false bottom of an oak writing desk, each one addressed in a hand she recognized with devastating certainty, and every single one of them bearing her name, Lady Eleanor Ashworth. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the first envelope. The candle on the mantel flickered violently, as though the room itself recoiled from what was about to be revealed. And in that moment, standing alone in the vast shadow-draped library of Thornmere Manor, with rain lashing against the tall Georgian windows and the scent of aged parchment filling every breath, Lady Eleanor's world, as she had so carefully constructed it, began to fall beautifully, irrevocably apart. She had come to Thornmere as a companion, nothing more, a woman of modest circumstances and excellent breeding, engaged to provide quiet society to the Duke's ailing mother, the Dowager Duchess, during the long grey weeks of autumn. She had told herself from the very first evening she had sat across from Edmund Blackwell at the dinner table and watched the candlelight carve shadows across his stern, unfathomable countenance, that she felt nothing, that the warmth that rose to her cheeks when he looked at her was nothing but the heat of the fireplace, that the peculiar ache in her chest when he spoke, low, deliberate, as though every word cost him something, was merely fatigue from the long journey north. She had been lying, of course, most ardently, most thoroughly, and most wretchedly lying to herself for the better part of 8 weeks. Before we go further into this story, if you are new to this channel, welcome to the Duke's Last Letters, where every week we bring you immersive, heartbreaking, and deeply romantic Regency stories just like this one. If this is the kind of story that makes your heart race, please take a moment right now to tap that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a single episode. We pour our hearts into every word, and it means the world to us. Now, let us return to Eleanor and to those devastating 43 letters. She unfolded the first one with hands she could no longer keep still. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "I write this knowing I shall never send it, for to send it would be to confess a weakness I have no business possessing, and yet I find that silence is no longer a comfort I can afford." She pressed her hand to her mouth. The date at the top of the page was the 5th of September, the very week she had arrived at Thornmere. He had written to her in secret from the very beginning. She read on, the words bleeding together in the dancing candlelight. "You laughed at dinner this evening at something my mother said, and the sound of it, I confess I do not know what to do with the sound of it. I have lived in this house for 34 years, and I did not know it was capable of holding such a sound. I did not know I was capable of wanting so desperately to be the cause of it." Eleanor sank into the leather chair beside the desk. Her silk gown rustled softly about her as she reached for the second letter, then the third, then the fourth. Each one was dated, each one unsent, each one more unguarded than the last. In them, the Duke of Thornmere, the man whose very glance could silence a drawing-room, whose reputation for cold reserve was spoken of in 3 counties, revealed himself to be something she had not dared imagine. He was utterly, helplessly, and silently in love with her. She was still seated amongst the letters when she heard the door open. She did not have to look up to know who it was. She felt his presence the way one feels a change of weather, a shift in the very quality of the room, a sudden inexplicable awareness of the room's every dimension. When she did raise her eyes, Edmund Blackwell, Duke of Thornmere, stood in the doorway in his dark evening coat, a single candelabra in his hand, and his expression, for the first time in all her weeks of careful observation, was not composed. It was shattered. His grey eyes moved from her face to the letters spread across his desk, and the colour drained from his countenance so completely that for a moment Eleanor feared he might be unwell.
"My lady," his voice was barely a sound, "I can explain. There is a letter here," she interrupted, and her own voice surprised her with its steadiness, "dated the 22nd of October. In it you write that you had resolved to speak to me. You write that you had made up your mind entirely, and yet—" she paused, her throat tightening. "You said nothing. You said nothing, Your Grace, not one single word." The Duke set the candelabra down on the side table with a care that seemed to require his entire concentration. He crossed the room slowly, and when he stopped, there was only the width of the great desk between them. The firelight caught the strong line of his jaw, the faint, terrible tension about his mouth. "I had no right," he said at last. "Your situation here, your position in this house as my mother's companion, any advance on my part would have been unconscionable. A man of my standing, pursuing a woman dependent upon his household's goodwill, it would have appeared as coercion. It would have been coercion, whatever my intentions. And so you wrote 43 letters you never intended to send." "I wrote 43 letters," he said quietly, "because I needed somewhere to put it. The feeling. It had nowhere else to go." If you are still with us, and I hope with all my heart that you are, now is the perfect moment to subscribe to the Duke's last letters if you have not already done so. There are so many more stories waiting for you here, stories of longing and scandal, and the kind of love that refuses, stubbornly and beautifully, to be extinguished. Subscribe now, and do not let a single one pass you by. And now we must return to Eleanor, for the most devastating moment of all is still to come. It was then that the door opened a second time. Lord Ashford, the Duke's cousin, a man of charming manners and deeply ungentlemanly intentions, stood in the doorway with a glass of brandy and an expression of absolute gleaming delight. He had heard. It was plain from the satisfied curl of his lip that he had stood in that corridor, and he had listened, and now he intended to use every syllable of what he had overheard to his considerable advantage. "How remarkable," Lord Ashford said pleasantly, stepping inside the room as though he had been invited. "The Duke of Thornmere reduced to love letters. The scandal sheets will adore this. A woman in your employ, Edmund. Think of what society will make of it." Eleanor rose to her feet. She felt no fear, only a white, clarifying fury. "Lord Ashford," she said, "you will say nothing." "Will I not?" "You will not." She met his gaze without flinching. "Because if you do, I shall be obliged to share what I know of your debts, your very considerable, very specific debts, to the gentleman to whom you owe them. And I believe, from what the Dowager Duchess has told me in confidence, that particular gentleman is not known for his patience." The silence that followed was extraordinary. Lord Ashford looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his cousin. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room, pulling the door shut behind him with a quiet, deliberate click. Eleanor exhaled slowly. It was Edmund who moved first. He came around the desk with an urgency that seemed to surprise even himself, and when he stopped before her, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, close enough to hear the unsteadiness of his breath, there were tears there, actual, unguarded, undeniable tears, standing bright in the grey eyes she had studied so long and understood so little. Eleanor. His voice in her mouth was not a title, not a formality. It was a confession. "I have spent my entire life in the belief that I was not, that I was incapable of—" He stopped, began again. "I never knew what love was. I thought it a sentiment for novels and foolish young men. I thought myself entirely immune to it."
He reached up and, with a reverence that made her breath catch, took her hand in both of his. "Until you," he said. "I never knew what love was until you." The rain had quieted, the candles burned low and golden, and in the great ancient library of Thornmere Manor, surrounded by 43 unsent letters that had waited faithfully in the dark, Lady Eleanor Ashworth looked at the Duke of Thornmere, at his tears, at his trembling hands, at the terrible, beautiful openness of his face, and understood at last that some silences are not emptiness. Some silences are simply love waiting for the right moment to speak. And there, dear listeners, we leave them, Eleanor and her Duke, standing at the beginning of everything. If this story moved you, if it made your heart ache in the very best way, please give it a like and share it with someone who loves a Regency romance. And if you are not yet subscribed to the Duke's Lost Letters, please do not wait another moment. Every week, a new story. Every week, a new love waiting to be discovered. Subscribe now, and we will see you in the next episode. Until then, may your own unspoken letters find their way home.